Kim Lea, 26 years old. This is the first ever post-crime mugshot of a criminal that has been released to the South Korean public without the criminal's consent in the entire history of modern-day South Korea. This event has recently occurred on April 22nd, 2024, and was all over the news on the same day. Now, this was quite a moment for the people of South Korea, to say the least, as while people from other nations are more than used to seeing mugshots of criminals on television, this is, quite literally, the very first time in which many South Koreans are seeing a post-arrest mugshot of a South Korean criminal on a public scale. And to know what this evil criminal did in order to make the South Korean prosecutors and the nation's justice system, usually notoriously known for defending the rights of the criminals, to still just basically come to say, screw this guy, and release the post-arrest mugshot of Kim Lea, we first have to look at the details of the crime itself, the recent changes in the laws of South Korea, as well as the social background of modern-day South Korea that contributed to the prosecutors to make such a decision. We'll go over them one by one, as well as share our thoughts on this issue at the end of the video as South Korean nationals. So let us dive in. On March 25, 2024, in Bongdam Town, located in the city of Hwaseong, South Korea, a young woman, Miss B, and her mother is walking towards an apartment building at 9:35 a.m. In this apartment building lived the 26-year-old university student, Kim Lea. Miss B and Lea were in a relationship, an abusive one at that. The prosecutors at the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office reported after investigation that Lea often made claims in the lines of, "If I break up with B, I'll kill B and make myself unalive as well." The prosecutors also stated that Lea was often physically violent with Miss B, as in throwing and breaking her smartphone, or punch Miss B to the point of bruises if they ever got into an argument. So Miss B arrived at a point where she alone could not properly end the relationship with Lea, most likely from her fear of literally being beaten to death, so decided to bring her mother along with her in order to tell Lea that she wants to break up with him. And with Miss B's mother right next to her, there is no possible way that Lea can get physically violent with Miss B, right? That turned out to be wrong. After they entered into his apartment building, Miss B and her mother knocks on the door of Lea's house. When he opened the door, Miss B and her mother got inside the house, then went on to finally tell him of what Miss B has desperately been wanting to say. She told him that she wanted to break up with him, citing his physical abuse as the reason. Lea, after hearing this, actually turns around and walks away from them. You may think, this guy was probably scared to do anything to Miss B, with Miss B's mother right next to her, so just took the news and went inside his room to cry or something. But no, the place he headed towards was his kitchen, and in his kitchen, he grabbed the kitchen knife, then begins to incessantly stab both Miss B and her mother. A resident living in the same apartment building told the reporters that she heard the sound of a woman screaming "Call 112," then eventually go silent. Miss B's mother received serious injuries, but is still thankfully alive, as Lea seems to have missed her vital organs. The mother is still hospitalized. Miss B, who was stabbed in her chest, was already in a state of cardiac arrest while she was being carried to the hospital, and tragically passed away shortly afterwards. Lea, most likely knowing that there is no way that he could run away and not eventually get caught with the blatant evidence of his crime, that was the two profusely bleeding bodies inside his very own house, went to the apartment janitor's office and told the janitor to call 112. The police soon arrived, then went on to arrest him. Lea is reported to have hurt his hand while stabbing Miss B to death. And with South Korea being the country that is quite benevolent to its criminals, it has been confirmed by the police that Lea has indeed received treatment for his hand soon after the arrest. Poor guy, right? Hurt his little hand while stabbing someone to the point of making them unalive. And the South Korean police reported that he was not cooperating with the police investigation, making up some truly BS of excuses, such as how he himself was still in a state of shock over what he has done, so could not be investigated in such a state. Please keep in mind that this mugshot was taken just a few hours after he committed the murder. Does this look like a person who has been crying and is in a state of immense shock and regret over what he has done? We cannot look inside his mind, but to us, that just does not seem to be the case. Now, there is not even the smallest of doubt that Kim Lea is one of the most evil type of human beings to ever exist. But with that said, South Korea has unfortunately seen an overwhelming number of such murderers, as well as other types of vile criminals over the past few years. I believe the one that a lot of our audience may already be aware of at this point is Chung Yoo-jung, the murderer who brutally made an English tutor unalive, then went on to dismember her to pieces in 2023. But with that said, even Chung Yoo-jung, the psychopathic murderer who was one of the most, if not the most televised criminal in South Korea in the year 2023, still did not get her post-arrest mugshot revealed. Now, you may have seen this particular photo going around often whenever there's a discussion of Chung Yoo-jung. To specify where this photo exactly first came from, this is the ID card photo of Chung Yoo-jung that was disclosed by the Busan Metropolitan Police. To provide a bit of background information behind why this photo from her ID card was publicized, a law was passed in 2010 in South Korea, which allowed the South Korean police to disclose the personal information of criminals who have committed the gravest of crimes, such as murder. Such disclosure also included revealing the face of the suspects. However, this law was rarely practiced in real life in South Korea, and the first legal precedent of the face of the criminal being revealed to the general public in the form of an ID photo reveal was with Jo Joo-bin, one of the leaders of South Korea's infamous nth room as blackmail ring in 2020. And after the face reveal of Jo Joo-bin through his resident ID photo in March 2020, such similar forms of national scale face reveal of criminals through their ID photos ensued. This is the ID photo of An Seung-jin, revealed by the Gyeongbuk Provincial Police. An Seung-jin is another accomplice of the nth room S blackmail ring. This is the ID photo of Chun Ju-an, revealed by the Seoul Metropolitan Police. He's the murderer who brutally made a 28-year-old female subway station employee unalive in the women's restroom at Sindang Station located in Seoul. And with that said, let us have a look at how they actually look like. Here is how An Seung-jin really looks like, compared to the ID photo disclosed by the Gyeongbuk Provincial Police. Here is how Chun Ju-an really looks like, compared to the ID photo disclosed by the Seoul Metropolitan Police. Needless to say, they look nothing like how they do in their ID photos. The South Korean public are not stupid. The people know that this whole ID card photo reveal thing is basically a joke, as these resident ID card photos and whatnot, revealed by the South Korean police, more oftentimes than not, are nothing like how these criminals look like in real life. So then the fundamental question has to be asked. Why not just simply release the post-arrest mugshots of the criminals, as done by many other countries? This is because South Korea has a law that protects the rights of the lawbreakers, which stipulates that when the person who has committed the crime refuses to have their mugshot be publicized, the police or the prosecutors cannot reveal their mugshots to the general public. So the process basically goes like this. In the instances when a certain criminal commits a crime that is extremely grave in nature and has already received a high degree of public attention, as with, again, let's say, Chung Yoo-jung and her murder and dismembering of the victim's body in 2023, the South Korean police or the prosecutors holds a meeting at what is called in Korean as 신상공개위원회, which can roughly be translated in English as Personal Information Disclosure Committee. Then they come to the agreement that the criminal's personal information, such as their face, name, date of birth, etc., should be disclosed to the public due to the seriousness of his or her crime. Regarding the face reveal part, they go to the criminal's jail cell, then literally ask the criminal, the South Korean Personal Information Disclosure Committee has decided that your personal information will be revealed to the public. Now, can we use your mugshot for your face reveal? And we believe you guys already know how the criminal will usually respond to that question. There is no possible way that almost any criminal would say, yes, please have my post-arrest mugshot, the closest and most accurate description of my face at the current phase, be made public on national television. So when the criminal rejects the disclosure of their mugshot to the public and just say no to the question, the police or the prosecutors now have to resort to their ID photos by law. Thus the reason why we see this heavily photoshopped ID photo of Chung Yoo-jung everywhere, in which one of her old classmates back from high school stated that she could not even recognize that it was her rather than the visually accurate mugshot of Chung Yoo-jung. And in the entire legal history of South Korea, there were literally two criminals of Lee Seok-jun, who assaulted a 21-year-old woman, then went on to stab and murder the victim's mother, and Choi Yun-jung, who beat a woman with a brass knuckle until she eventually passed away, then attempted to assault her. When the police asked him if their post-arrest mugshots could be utilized for their public face reveal, said, "Yeah, go ahead, use my mugshot." Every single other face-revealed criminal in the entire legal history of South Korea, when asked by the police or the prosecutors if his or her mugshot can be used for their public face reveal, as you can imagine, said no. And the sad thing is, at this point, this is not even that surprising. I mean, we are all empirically aware of how most of these criminals are. Let us just have a look at today's story of Kim Lea. He had no problem constantly punching his girlfriend to the point of bruises and inflicting physical pain on her while they were dating. He had no problem repeatedly stabbing her to the point of making her unalive. Such a ruthless guy, eh? Maybe he's just numb to the concept of pain, including inflicting pain upon himself as well. But then, there he was, having the absolute nerve to whine about how he hurt his hand while stabbing Miss B and her mother, and demanded treatment for his hand after the arrest. We have to also remember the fact that, according to the investigation report filed by the Suwon prosecutor's office, Lea constantly said with his very own mouth while he was in a relationship with Miss B that if he ever breaks up with her, he will first make her unalive, then make himself unalive afterwards. And now, as he repeatedly said before, Lea did take Miss B's life after she told him that she wanted to break up with him, so he kept to his word on that half of what he said. But now when he came to committing to the other half of what he said, oh no, he suddenly changes his mind as the process of making himself unalive. That's gonna hurt him, right? So he himself has just decided to stay alive, as his hand was apparently already hurting too much from what he did to Miss B and her mother. And this is, frankly speaking, just a pattern for the majority of such criminals, causing others indescribable pain. No problem. They really could not care less, and more often than not, are just emotionally numb to the whole ordeal. But when it comes to a matter that will negatively affect their well-being, even to the slightest, such as having their mugshot be revealed to the general public, which could make life hard for them once they finish serving time and get back out to society, then they start losing their minds, talking about how their rights are being violated, how it's unconstitutional, etc., etc. In fact, this is exactly what Lea did once the South Korean prosecutors decided to reveal his mugshot to the public. He first vehemently refused to have his mugshot be disclosed to the public, as how every single other face-revealed criminal in South Korea have done in the past, with the only historical exception of Lee Seok-jun and Choi Yun-jung, when the police or the prosecutor asked if their mugshots can be utilized. Then on April 5th, 2024, the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office decided to make history and make the first legal precedent in South Korea of where the mugshot of the criminal was still to be publicly revealed, despite the criminal's adamant refusal. We will discuss the recent legal changes in South Korea, which enabled the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office to take such a precedent-setting action shortly afterwards. But briefly returning back to the timeline of how Lea reacted to his mugshot reveal, Lea basically went batshit, and on April 9th, 2024, had the audacity to ask the judges at the Suwon District Court for an injunction on the prosecutor's decision to reveal his mugshot despite his refusal, and requested the court to stop them from going ahead with this. But on April 18th, 2024, the Suwon District Court dismissed his request and gave the final go sign to the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office to disclose Lea's mugshot to the South Korean public. So on April 22nd, 2024, history was indeed made in South Korea with this mugshot of Kim Lea. In terms of Lea, he has now actually really did go on to sue the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office over their unlawful disclosure of his mugshot. The Suwon District Prosecutors stated that they will actively respond to Kim Lea's lawsuit against them once the legal proceedings begin. So at this point, many of us may think it's a good thing that the Suwon District Prosecutors finally set the first legal precedent in South Korea of the mugshot of the criminal being disclosed for public interest despite criminal refusal. But did you not say earlier that South Korea has a law which stipulates that even if the South Korean Personal Information Disclosure Committee accepts the police or the prosecutor's request to publicly reveal the face of the criminal, it still cannot disclose the criminal's mugshot if the criminal refuses? This is where the new law in South Korea, which came to effect on January 25th, 2024, comes into play. And Chung Yoo-jung, once again, was at the center of this change. Now, as we've mentioned earlier, the people in South Korea already knew that the ID photo reveal was just heavily inadequate, to put it most mildly, and most people did not expect much out of them anyways. But the only reason why the South Korean people at least barely tolerated it was partly because, despite the ridiculousness that was the ID photo disclosure as a means to show the real face of the criminal, the South Korean justice system did give the public at least one chance to see the real face of the criminal offender, the photo line. To elaborate, when the suspect is held in police custody, the time arrives when they have to temporarily leave jail and be transferred to the prosecutor's office in order to attend investigation conducted by the prosecution. And when it comes to South Korea's most notorious murderers, whom the South Korean Personal Information Disclosure Committee accepted their face reveal, the police first informs all the reporters of the country of what time this criminal will head to the prosecutor's office. So when the criminal exits the jail building in order to head to the car, they have to briefly stop by at the photo line in front of the police station, where the reporters take photos of their face and ask them a bunch of questions. And this is the time when the South Korean general public can see the real faces of the nation's most infamous criminals of the time. The vast majority of the clearest and most accurate photos that you've seen of South Korea's most heinous criminals of the 21st century, such as Cho Ju-bin of the Nth Room, Chun Ju-an, the murderer who killed a subway station female employee whom he was stalking on, are taken on the police station photo line. However, with COVID, things began to change for the worse. Prior to the pandemic, the criminal whom the South Korean Personal Information Disclosure Committee decided to reveal their face on, based on the seriousness of his or her crime, could not wear a mask to hide his or her face on the photo line by law. However, after the outbreak of the pandemic, the face-revealed criminals now had the option to keep their masks on at the photo line, and many did, unsurprisingly, take the opportunity to keep their masks on. So even in 2021, there was public dissent in South Korea, with many requesting the implementation of mugshots for the face reveal. But the tipping point for the mugshot-related laws to actually change was in 2023. Progressively throughout, and even after the pandemic, the face-revealed criminals began to get more and more creative with the ways of hiding their face on the photo line. On January 4th, 2023, Lee Gi-young, who killed his ex-girlfriend and a taxi driver, appeared on the photo line at Ilsan Dongbu police station to be transferred to the prosecution. So the South Korean public were waiting to see the face of this killer because, as you can imagine, all that the people had up to that point was his ID photo. But when he stood on the photo line, not only did he have his mask all the way up to right under his eye, but got creative with the headgear as well, with him pulling down the hood of his winter jacket to as much as he could, not to even mention his long hair covering his eyes. This is the guy, after killing his girlfriend and the taxi driver, and initially managed to not get caught by the South Korean police for quite a while, was acting all tough and badass post-crime, picking fights with random people on the street. This is how he actually got caught, by the way, with him probably feeling omnipotent at that point, after still not being caught by the South Korean police. Even after 2 murders, he was going around after midnight, provoking random strangers. But then during one of such street altercations, he hurt his hand. So he went to Ilsanbaek Hospital, located in Gyeonggi Province, South Korea, to receive treatment for his hand. And that is when he got arrested by the police. So based on how much of a reckless, no F's given type of guy he seems to be, not even trying to lay low after getting away with 2 murders, many would have even expected him to just walk up to the photo line, showing his full face, and maybe even raise his middle finger to the reporters. But turns out that he's not such a big, bad, tough guy, as we can see from his desperate attempts to hide his face like a coward that he actually is, regardless of how strong and powerful he wanted to feel when he was with people who were physically weaker than him, as in the case of his girlfriend or the 60-year-old taxi driver, who were both made unalive through his hands, or people whom he was picking fights with on the street. So the reporters obviously could not get a clear shot of his face. This led one reporter to take a photo of him from the bottom angle and managed to get at least the eye portion of his face. This particular photo is the closest shot that we have of Lee Gi-young. As you can imagine, more public dissent ensued, with these murderers being more and more creative in their ways of hiding their faces. But mugshot reveals were still not permitted due to laws regarding the protection of criminals' rights. But in June 2023, this is when the South Korean people, and subsequently even the South Korean government, basically said, enough is enough. On June 2nd, 2023, it was the day for Chung Yoo-jung to stand on the photo line in front of the Busan Dongnae police station before being transferred for prosecutorial investigation. With her being the most discussed criminal of 2023 in South Korea, the entire population was waiting to see her face at the photo line, as people obviously knew that she was not going to look like her ID photo. But then, she appeared in front of the Busan Dongnae police station, looking like this. Yes. Even until this very day, Chung Yoo-jung is by far one of the most well-covered murderers who stood on the photo line of all time in South Korea. As in, when we first see this, we really cannot do anything else but just laugh in disbelief. How can someone who seemed like an individual who has completely left humanity behind, from the way she murdered a complete stranger, cut her body into pieces, put it in a suitcase, and bounce happily down the street, all of a sudden even have the mind to be so worried about anybody seeing even a glimpse of her face? Yes, there has been plenty of criminals in South Korea who wore masks before on the photo line. Yes, we had criminals who wore hats. But never have the people in South Korea see a criminal so successfully cover her entire face in such a strategic fashion, with her mask actually covering her eyes. Yes, her eyes. Then the glasses covering the mask, and the hat. Let's not even talk about the hat. The only murderer whom the South Korean general public can think of that has hid his or her face as well as Chung Yoo-jung would be Go Yoo-jung, who was convicted of ending the life of her husband, as well as being suspected of murdering her stepson. So needless to say, from a normal angle, one could not see any part of Chung Yoo-jung's face. So as in the case of Lee Gi-young, the reporters tried to take a photo of her from the bottom angle. But unlike Lee Gi-young, we still cannot see any part of Chung Yoo-jung's face from the bottom angle except her chin. The entire nation, after seeing Chung Yoo-jung up on the photo line, got absolutely furious. And we are guessing that even the president of South Korea saw her on the news on the day as well, and basically thought something in the lines of, "Oh hell no!" As only a few days after Chung Yoo-jung's photo line appearance fiasco, the very ruling party of South Korea brought the matters to the National Assembly on June 18th, 2023, and have a new law called 특정 중대범죄 피의자 등 신상 정보 공개에 관한 법률. In Korean, which can roughly be translated as Act on Disclosure of Personal Information of Suspects of Serious Crimes, be passed, with the law eventually coming to full effect on January 25th, 2024. The actual legal name of the act is obviously too long, even in Korean, so the people in South Korea describe this new law simply as the Mugshot Law. Under this new law, the South Korean police or the prosecutors could now reveal the mugshots of the criminals, even without criminal consent. And as we all know by now, the very first of such mugshot reveal in South Korean history was the mugshot of Kim Lea on April 22nd, 2024. The passing of the new Mugshot Act in South Korea, and the prosecutors at the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office actually stepping up, exercised this new law, and set the first legal precedent in the nation of mugshot disclosure without the suspect's consent, is definitely a step towards the right direction for criminal justice in South Korea. However, considering how the new Mugshot Act was already in full effect all the way back from January 2024, we can also safely state that the police and the prosecutors in South Korea are, at least to some degree, still hesitant to disclose the criminals' mugshots, as the South Korean people had to wait all the way until April 22nd, 2024 to see the very first one. And it doesn't help that for some reason, the serious criminal offender's mugshot can only be disclosed to the general public for 30 days by law. After the 30-day period limit, the mugshot of the criminal that was uploaded on either the website of the police department or the prosecutor office's department will be taken down. So then the question has to be asked, despite the overall reluctance that is clearly evident in setting the first legal precedent of the non-suspect consented mugshot in South Korea, why did it have to be Kim Lea? Why not any other criminal in South Korea who has already committed serious offenses such as murder before the one committed by Kim Lea on March 25th, 2024? We believe there are quite a few reasons for this. First, it did not help that Lea was not being cooperative with the police investigation, having the nerve to ask for medical treatment on his hand after the arrest, not to mention his, "Oh, I'm also so shocked by what I did" attitude, and using this as an excuse to not participate in police investigation. He's acting as if he's actually the victim of what he did in his moment of passion, and that it was not the real him who committed the murder. So based on his attitude, there is no way that the investigative agencies, both the police or the prosecutors, saw him in any favorable light or thought that he was repenting. And there might even be some hidden, unrevealed reasons in which the Suwon District prosecutors have not yet informed the general public on as to why they thought that it was necessary to show his real face to the South Korean general public. To elaborate, anyone who's South Korean knows that the name Lea cannot possibly be a real name given upon birth. It does not sound Korean and is just not a name that a Korean guy has. And it turned out this was indeed not the real name given to Lea upon birth by his parents. His real name was, in fact, Kim Seung-yeon. And after he became an adult, it seemed that he underwent a legal name change and altered his name to Kim Lea. And according to an employee of the hair salon in which Lea frequented often, he registered his name as Kim Do-il, another random name popping out of nowhere. According to his ex-girlfriend, who conducted an interview with SBS, a TV broadcaster in South Korea, Lea was a guy who had a lot of secrets and was always on the run. So Lea is just an extremely fishy guy, to say the least, with potential prior criminal records in which we may not be aware of, meaning that there could be information regarding Lea in which the prosecutors found out during investigation, which could have further contributed to them believing that this is a person whom his real face and name has to be disclosed to the general public. But then, we believe that the biggest reason why the Suwon District prosecutors decided to reveal the mugshot of Kim Lea was due to the current state of dating violence in South Korea. Now, dating violence is currently a serious social issue in South Korea. According to South Korea's National Police Agency, the number of suspects arrested for a dating violence-related crime in South Korea were 12,828 in the year 2022. This is a staggering increase of 30.6% compared to the year 2019, when the number of suspects arrested for a dating violence-related crime were 9,823. And these are not just numbers. These are couples in real life being physically violent to their supposed loved ones, with more oftentimes than not, the degree of violence extending to the level of killing their partners. And although there definitely are cases where the female partner is physically violent to their boyfriends or husbands, let us be honest, there are just factually more men-to-women dating violence that's committed around the year than the other way around. And if you're South Korean, you'll also know that there's almost a weekly news of dating violence of a one along the lines of a boyfriend beating his girlfriend to the point of making her unalive. I mean, literally as I was writing this video script on April 25th, 2024, another news came out just a few hours ago of a man who stabbed his wife to death in the city of Goyang, South Korea. And the South Korean general public have always had a large degree of dissent regarding how every time there's another news of a dating violence related crime in the lines of a girlfriend being punched and kicked to the point of her passing by her boyfriend, the victim's name and face is revealed, while the perpetrator boyfriend has his face all safely blurred out with his name remaining anonymous. This is exactly what happened to Miss Yejin Hwang, who was beaten to death by her boyfriend in July 2021. We still do not know the real name of the murderer boyfriend, but do know that he received a mere 7-year prison sentence for what he has done. So in the eyes of the South Korean general public, it always seemed as if the nation's justice system was putting the rights and the well-being of the perpetrators ahead of the one of the victims. But the dating violence-related crime that is currently shaking South Korea right now is the death of Miss Yoo Jung on April 10th, 2024. Miss Lee, who was 19 years old at the time, was mercilessly beaten and strangled by her ex-boyfriend, Kim, who entered into her room after finding out the door lock password to her house. She was severely injured from the beating and received damages such as brain hemorrhage and had to be hospitalized.
엄마, 나 빨리 앞으로 와줘. 무슨 일 있어? 나 엄청 때렸는데 나 여기 문제 생겼어.
Her condition worsened during hospital treatment, and she tragically passed away from organ failure on the morning of April 10th, 2024. A few hours after Miss Lee passed away, the South Korean police rightfully arrested her ex-boyfriend on an immediate basis. However, the South Korean prosecutors, after being informed of the fact that the police arrested the ex-boyfriend Kim, did not approve of the arrest by the police. So the police had to release Kim in just a few hours after the arrest due to the prosecution's disapproval. Now, this murder case subsequently went viral all over South Korea after being released to the public, and we are guessing that the reaction of the South Korean prosecutors were in the lines of,
Hell no!
as they probably did not expect this case to be released to the media and subsequently receive national coverage to the extent that it did. As after all, there are almost 13,000 criminals in South Korea who are arrested on dating violence-related charges on an annual basis, and only a tiny handful of these dating violence cases get media exposure. So there was even a physical protest held on April 18th, 2024, urging the South Korean investigative agencies to arrest the murderer Kim immediately instead of letting him out be free, as he currently is right now. There are even reports in which I've read in the comment section of related videos of how the ex-boyfriend Kim is out carefree on the streets of South Korea, still having fun and drinking with friends, and how him and his parents offered 5 million Korean won, which is around $3,700 to Miss Lee's mother and father as a settlement fee, and told them to stop making such a big fuss. And if we remember correctly, the investigative agency that are more at fault regarding this case are the South Korean prosecutors. The South Korean police, as problematic as they often are in their own right, did technically arrest the murderer ex-boyfriend on an immediate basis after Miss Lee's death and had the intention of investigating and holding him under custody until trial. However, it was the Changwon District prosecutors who did not approve of the arrest and made the police release Kim. And with the Changwon District prosecutors' action of disapproving the arrest of the murderer ex-boyfriend being made national news and subsequently leading to actual physical protests, much of the South Korean public once again solidified their opinion that the prosecutors and law officials of the country are people who side with the criminal perpetrators rather than the victims. Even the very Attorney General of South Korea seems to have been somewhat annoyed at the Changwon prosecutors for making the nation's prosecutors once again lose face, as the Attorney General himself made a visit to the Changwon District Prosecutor's Office building on April 23rd, 2024, just a few days after the protests. The formal reason for his visit was that he wanted to encourage the prosecutors at the Changwon District Division, but we all know his main message to the Changwon prosecutors was most likely a one in the lines of, get your together and just don't do dumb stuff in the lines of disapproving a murderer's arrest, especially in today's age of social media where it is a lot more difficult to hide cases compared to before, as well as the fact that criminal cases regarding dating violence is something in which the South Korean people have been exponentially getting more sensitive about in the past 3 to 4 years. So we believe the prosecutors at the Changwon prosecutor's office who mishandled Ms. Yo Jung's case and subject the prosecutors in South Korea under intense public criticism are currently thanking the prosecutors at the Suwon District prosecutor's office who, just 4 days after the anti-investigative agency protests, made the first ever disclosure of a non-criminal consented mugshot in South Korean history with the girlfriend killer Kim Lea, which, at least to some extent, alleviated the public's anger by showing the South Korean people that the prosecutors of the country do not always side with the dating violence perpetrators. The South Korean people are tired. The people are tired of not knowing whether the person sitting next to them on the train are murderers or ex-convicts with 16 criminal records. People just have no way of knowing for the most part with all these legal protection measures for the criminals that firmly exist in South Korea. And as many of our subscribers may already know at this point, although I moved to Japan in 2012 for university and stayed later for work, I was born and for the most part raised in Seoul, South Korea up until college. And I have my reasons of why I was also tired of a dimension of South Korea, not related to dating violence or anything of that nature, but related to the nation's academic system and how people in such a competitive atmosphere can come to commit the most immoral of acts. Perhaps I'll make a separate video on this topic later on, leading me to study to attend the university in Japan. So with that said, it just absolutely saddens us to hear of yet another social problem in South Korea, that is the dating violence related crimes in the likes of Kim Lea's murder of his girlfriend, which seems to be occurring so frequently throughout the nation in the recent phase. I mean, a 30.6% increase in the number of suspects being arrested for crimes related to dating violence in just a 4-year time span is utterly insane. So for our subscribers who are watching this video right now, our first hope is that you don't walk away from this video with a rather extreme belief that all romantic relationships that you may get involved in South Korea are going to end up with the male partner becoming physically violent towards you on an eventual basis. But at the same time, please do also be careful and possess a sense of caution if you ever start dating in South Korea, which we actually believe applies to all countries in general as well, and walk away from that relationship immediately if you ever even see a hint of the red flag of your partner raising their hand against you. And on a societal level, we sincerely hope that through the recent legal changes in South Korea and how the mugshots of serious criminal offenders can now still be publicly disclosed despite the criminal's non-consent, as in the case of Kim Lea, the potential criminals in South Korea, if they cannot get themselves to stop committing indescribable crimes on a voluntary basis from their discretion on what is the humanly right or wrong thing to do, at least stop themselves from beating or stabbing another person to death in the fear that their name and face, rather than be protected on a guaranteed basis, as in how it used to be, can now be publicly disclosed for the entire nation to see, something in which so many serious criminal offenders in South Korea are apparently so afraid of.